Thank you very much, and thank everyone to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be within this organization, and for me also it's really a pleasure to be here in Serbia for my first time. So, what I'm going to present today, we will see is more about Sinan's period, and let's say the heritage left in the middle of the 16th century by him, along part of the trail that we are talking today, but mostly I will concentrate on Thrace region, Trachea. And but before starting, I would also like to say that I perfectly agree with the struggle of Fokke and the Netherlands Institute in Turkey, because I know very well how difficult it can be to create the proper, let's say, initiatives able to combine together political from one side, scholars from the others, and exactly as it was mentioned and stressing out the formation of a new generation of experts that can deal with the heritage. Me personally, I'm involved in different projects. I'm a member of ICOMOS Italy, so for the protection of the heritage. And at the same time, I'm part of a foundation based in Genoa, which is called Alte Vie, which is also something similar to Sultan Trail, because they are dealing with the Genoese outside Genoa. So it means all the routes, commercial routes, and that they had in the past, we're talking about 12th, 13th, 14th century, all over the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. So also that is a very big project to try to put together even more countries than these. So it's a very big task, and I don't know, maybe 20 years or more, we will see the results. But it's also, for instance, in that group, I'm responsible for what concerns Turkey, and especially Galata and the heritage of the Genoese there. And so there are very important issues, I think, today to try to manage together the history, the heritage, and also thanks to initiatives like the Sultan Trails as well, to bring, for instance, tourism, awareness, and especially awareness. What you see today now, what I will present, it was part of my PhD that I completed almost 20 years ago, and later I still work on it, about how even this heritage somehow it's lost or forgotten, even though in a very limited area as a trace. So I visited several times through the years, not hiking, just strolling around in each place, but I visit those places several times. Most of the pictures you will see here are my own pictures that I used then for the publication of this work that I did on Sinan. And my point of view was exactly this, not just focus on the monument, which is easy sometimes, but focusing on the relations with the landscape, with the territory, and how those buildings or complexes or whatever were part of a system which today is completely forgotten. And what was keeping together is what I used to define as Ottoman landscape, that actually really goes from Istanbul towards Vienna. As you know, there was the famous publication by Luda Klushakova from Prague, University of Prague, in which he rediscovered these sketches in Leiden, which are exactly the route from Vienna to Istanbul, to just sketches, visual sketches of the towns all along the Imperial Road, let's say. And it's very interesting to see how from Vienna, getting close to the core of the Ottoman Empire, the skyline of those cities were changing and transforming slowly into an Ottoman, what I used to define Ottoman context, an Ottoman landscape. Unfortunately today, my point of view is that even in Turkey, this is like forgotten. And it's something that instead goes behind the borders of the countries. Even this road, it crosses several countries, so it's something that is glued together, these countries. Of course, I focus mostly on the Ottoman period, but this can be extended also to even from the ancient Romans or even before. No, those routes were always used because trade, commerce, and etc. So, in this, what I will present, the protagonist, of course, is Sinan, the Ottoman architect. I just put some short biography there, but everyone knows, born from Christian origins in the center of Anatolia, Kayseri, and then becoming a janissary, so participating in several military campaigns for half of his life, and then turning into the architect of the empire, chief architect of the empire, and the title of Engineer of the World. That was his title, Engineer of the World, at the age of more or less 50 years old, something like that. It's not very clear. But what is interesting that he kept that position for the following 50 years. So it has an extensive production, or also even not done directly by him, but his teams. Of course, he was managing several team of architects. So some bridges, like the most famous, like in Mostar Bridge, was not directly done by him, but was supervised somehow by him. So basically, this is the area. Of course, this is the same map, and focusing mostly on trays, because it's where we have the highest concentration of Sinan's masterpiece and works, for a simple reason, that Edirne was the previous capital, and Constantinople, then Istanbul, became the new capital. So along the last part of the imperial rule, or the Sultan trail, they want also to show off more the power of the empire. So especially for the ones approaching from west, reaching Edirne was already understanding that they were reaching a very strong and powerful empire. So that's why along those roads we have mostly of the concentration of these works and most of the transformation. I point out the three main routes, actually, land routes of trace, and the one in the middle is the one that I focus more in this study. We start with very just in the outskirts of Istanbul. I didn't take into consideration anything from Istanbul, but just, let's say, along the roads. And like for what Fokke was presenting before, I have to make the same consideration. This is a picture from the 70s in which we still perceive the countryside, still we perceive a sort of landscape in which the bridge was integrated with the track, was integrated with a route, and so on. I wrote, I think now 10 years ago, something like Lost Highways, in the sense that all these routes are completely disappearing today, especially in Turkey, unfortunately. So when you see something like this, it's not anymore. It's completely surrounded by highways, high-rise buildings, and it's really completely decontextualized. And so when I was tracking all these places, always wondering to find connection between one and the next one, is almost impossible. For instance, the area of, Büyükçekmece, also that here is just in a sketch to show what the in Ottoman times was look like through the main monuments, and even back then it was shown proudly, even in book illumination book in miniatures, showing, for instance, the bridge, the famous bridge. And today, of course, the bridge is still there, but somehow again the surrounding landscape and the areas is, is not anymore so traceable as a part of a system. And those monuments, which are still there, they are a bit lost. I found also very interesting descriptions by the travelers. So I put some descriptions here and there. In this case, you can see even the language, of course, from 17th century travels, but exactly explaining when they were crossing those bridges, when they were staying in some caravanserai, how it was, or when they were admiring the beauty of the mosques and some environments. So it's very interesting to me also. I collect many works done by travelogues, let's say. So this is, for instance, the caravanserai, still used today as a cultural center. Interesting, one of few examples of minarets combined with the masjids. One of the rare cases still existing. not so much in use today, but it's very interesting architecture. The fountain, and so on. And going on, you see passing other bridges. This is, for instance, the bridge connecting to Silivri, indicated by Belgrave as Celebrea, with the old, let's say, Latin name. And also he spent a night in Büyük Çekmece, the other bridge we saw before, and then he crossed this bridge to reach the town of Silivri. And this is Lüleburgaz, which was one of the most important posts along the street, midway between Istanbul and Edirne. We talk about approximately 250 kilometers. So today is 3 hours car. You can reach. Train still is a bit longer. But back then, with the caravan and everything, it took like 8 hours to move from one stage to the other. So even 250 kilometers was not a very short, let's say, trip. That's why we have along these caravan complexes all along the main Imperial Road. In this case, this was a beautiful caravanserai. It was one of the biggest, actually, in Ottoman time. And here you can see some view of the mosque, part of the complex, inside the fountains and interior of the mosque as well. Or here you can see, unfortunately, what remained of this huge caravanserai. I found description, for instance, one Irish-Italian traveler who described how he spent the night in one of the two caravanserai was only for the Christians. He mentioned that. So he spent the night there, spent two nights, something like that, and he described how beautiful it was. He said that he didn't enter in the mosque, but when he was too tired, he entered directly to the caravanserai. So I found very useful this also witness of the time, these people who traveled there, because in this case we don't have anything anymore about this caravanserai but the description of it by some travelers. This also very particular, very peculiar. We have very few of these structures, and this was along the main roads with the market, street market, Arasta, and sometimes we have 2 or 3 cases in which you have these structures which are very monumental and very unique. You cannot see anyone else, called Maksure, which was even depicted in the past by some travelers. You can see here how it's standing still today. Very interesting elements. It's like, I don't know, it has something of regal and important, no? Passing through something like this. And it was in the center of the town of Lüleburgaz. And this the Turkish baths that were recently restored for some facilities and shops and so on. At least when I visited the first time, they were completely abandoned. Now at least they rebuild it. And some bridges which are left completely also abandoned in the middle of the countryside, like this is the Lüleburgaz bridge. And as you can see, I mean, this is the road that goes towards or from Edirne directly. Here we are in Baba Eski, still on the same road. The bridge actually was done a bit later, not by Sinan, but was done at the beginning of the 17th century. And here we are very, very few left of the original complex, also almost disappeared. And this is one of the most beautiful bridges. Now it's in the middle of nowhere, the Alpolu Bridge, and it's quite impressive as a structure. And here we are getting close to Edirne Absa, so another impressive complex with again this portal, this gate passing through. No, you have to pass through on the main roads. This is how it was look like with the Arasta, which is completely lost, and you can see very few remain standing, still standing of this project, but quite monumental, quite imperial, no? The impression of passing through this kind of gates. And this, unfortunately, you see, for instance, the Turkish baths completely in ruin and abandoned, and the parking plots taking space all over this area. And even Edirne, so the other imperial capital, I found out this very beautiful description by von Moltke, was a German, Prussian, who worked for the Ottomans actually, modernizing the army. And he described exactly the landscape in which the Mosque of Selimiye by Sinan, it's like very much visible from very, very far. So along the routes, it was not by chance that Sinan placed that mosque exactly in a position that could have been more visible, so that when the travelers were approaching, they have very clear that if that was an imperial city and they were getting close to Istanbul. So it has a very much symbolic meanings. And I think this engraving for middle 18th century, it shows very, very well how it was the city back then. I'm about to finish, just a few more slides. This one of the also most impressive caravanserai built by Rustem Pasha, double caravanserai, the view of the internal view, and the hammam. Half of it was demolished to let the streets pass by, so, but still is in use, so still today it's used as a Turkish hammam. And the Arasta, the main one of the main market, also here I found descriptions by other travelers like Lady Montagu in the 18th century, or some bridges left. This I put this one because it's the one built by Sinan, several times damaged by the flood, of course. It's an area where the rivers are constantly flooding, unfortunately. So you can see, when I took the picture, they were just rebuilding completely new the parapet, actually, the stone elements on the top of it. And one of the remains of the palace, and today is in the middle of nowhere, so you don't understand. You see this beautiful tower, but there is no anymore the palace around it. And the Mosque of Selimiye, of course, with several views and the plans. So it's one of the most important achievements made by Sinan in the very, very late of his career. And the bazaar nearby. And we end up with the bridge, which nowadays is in Bulgaria, but was very, very close. We're talking about 10 kilometers, something like that, from Edirne. And very interesting is the first bridge I showed at the beginning, actually, in the presentation. It was probably one of the first work done by Sinan, because 1928, when it was in a military campaign together with Çoban Mustafa Pasha, probably was one of his work as engineer to let the troops to cross the river very close outside the border. So, thank you. I think I say everything. I hope to get some questions and something. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Luca. For a very illustrative introduction. I see a question from Dan Evans.
Yeah, if I may, extremely interesting what you're telling me. I was just wondering whether the Sinan's heritage, the remnants, have been subject to demolition, willful destruction, or has it been pretty well reserved? It seems that we show a lot of remaining structures, but has there been historically some willful destruction?
Well, you know, since we are also in an area of war, there were several wars, so actually many buildings got completely lost. This is the bridge in Svilengrad, for instance. There was a complex nearby founded by the wife of the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, no? Aseki Urem, and no traces left of the complex, completely disappeared, for instance. But back then it was instead a very important pious foundation made by the Sultan. Today we have just a bridge, but no complex. And so we saw another Lüleburgaz caravanserai. Next to there was another Büyük Karıştıran, another very huge caravanserai. There are no traces at all, no traces at all. And to me, I also work a lot on bridges, because bridges are spread everywhere in the Balkans, and mostly are basically Ottoman time bridges, maybe based on previously ancient Roman or Byzantine bridges, but redone completely in Ottoman times. And also this is very interesting because they are not, many of them are not in very good conditions. Some, yes, like Mostar Bridge became a very famous, of course, and especially after the war, and reconstruction in 2004. Last year I participated in a big event in Mostar for the 20 years of the reconstruction of the bridge, so there was a lot of attention. But they are rare cases when you compare to the incredible amount of, let's say, heritage that we have and that we should protect. But first we need to create, in a more maybe scholar way, awareness of it. What we need still is an awareness. So these touristic enterprises to develop such kind of routes for hiking or biking or whatever, I think they are very good initiative in this sense to create more awareness about these spaces.